very good morning, and I'd like to thank the organizers of this summit for inviting me to give this address. This summit has great importance because it deals with the question of global warming and the reduction of greenhouse gases which cause the global warming and its adverse consequences. Specifically, the summit, I believe, is going to concentrate on personal transportation, and I would therefore like to speak on personal transportation, particularly cars, and a little bit about scooters and two-wheelers. It is generally thought that the transportation sector is a very big contributor to greenhouse gases and pollution, and that electric vehicles are the long-term solution to this problem. Let me first talk about the transportation sector itself. In Europe, the transportation sector contributes 29% of the total greenhouse gases. Cars contribute over half of this at 15%. In India, the corresponding figures for the transportation sector are 13%, and for cars, scooters, and motorcycles put together, it's only 5%. So we are 1/3 of Europe. Cars itself would be about 2% of the total greenhouse gases. This has some relevance to what we are trying to do in this sector. I believe that each country has necessarily to determine its strategies and its programs for reducing greenhouse gases in the context of the circumstances prevailing in that country, its resources, its economy, and such relevant factors. Now, in particular, I want to emphasize that India is very different from Europe and other Western countries, including the USA. If we just adopt whatever strategies they are following broadly, in a sense, I don't think we will be doing justice to what we need to do in India. Let me highlight some of the big differences which exist between the Western countries and India. Per capita incomes in India are about 5% of those in Europe and 3% of those in the United States. This has direct relevance to the affordability of personal transport vehicles and customer choices when it comes to personal transportation. We use a very large number of scooters and motorcycles in India. Number is well over 200 million. And they are used despite the fact that they're unsafe, uncomfortable, families have to be transported in them, but it's the affordability factor which compels people to use two-wheelers. None of the Western countries use two-wheelers for personal transport. This is a very big difference between us. Car penetration in India is less than 3% of the population. Over 70% of the cars used in India are small cars. In the EU, European Union, the penetration is over 50%, and in the USA, it is about 87%. Small cars like those used in India are not used in the USA at all, and the percentage in the EU is also very small. This has an impact on GHG and the solutions which we adopt for solving the problem of global warming. This is because electrification of small cars leads to a proportionately much higher cost compared to the impact on a big car. This means that small car buyers who are today already stretched in their ability to buy a car, and a large percentage of people wanting personal transport cannot afford to buy a car, they buy two-wheelers, they will be further excluded from the market of four-wheelers. In other words, they will not buy expensive, small electric vehicles. The penetration of electric vehicles so far, despite all the programs which we have had and the incentives which are being given, is about 0.5%. And therefore, we have to consider whether the EV strategy is really serving its purpose in present times in India. This has to be further considered in the context of the fact that in India, while the installed capacity of thermal power generation is something slightly above 50%, when it comes to energy use, 75% of the energy used in India is from coal-fired thermal stations. And therefore, the reduction in the greenhouse gases by using electric cars, when 75% of the total energy is coming from thermal power stations, becomes much, much less than what is generally thought. Electric cars in this circumstances are not clean cars at all. And therefore, we need to look at this, and electric cars may become relevant in India in a much larger measure when it comes to bigger cars and when the contribution of coal-fired energy in the consumption of the people in this country becomes much, much smaller. What alternatives do we have which we can look at for India? We have already found that CNG is an acceptable fuel for small cars in India. People prefer and buy CNG cars readily today in India, partly because it's cheaper, but partly also, I think, because they find that CNG cars, as an alternative to petrol cars, are better for them and the environment. Now, for the two-wheelers, that means the scooters and the motorcycles, there is no real alternative to electrification, and therefore the electrification of two-wheelers has to continue. At the same time, question which I think all of us need to ask, and especially those of us who are the well-off people in this country, that is it our intention that the bulk of Indians should always remain users of scooters and motorcycles? They should suffer the disadvantages of this mode of transport because there is no other mode of transport available to them if the cost of electrification makes these vehicles out of reach for them for a long time to come. Now, having said that, the CNG program is being pursued by not only Maruti but other manufacturers, and the government is expanding the network, which has made life easier for the consumers. But there is no other incentive available for CNG cars. They are taxed exactly in the same manner as the much higher polluting petrol cars and diesel cars. I wonder if this is the right approach for promoting CNG in India. Besides the CNG which we are getting from the petroleum wells and importing CNG, a very interesting fact which has been brought to my notice is that bio-CNG is actually carbon negative. To use bio-CNG, there is actually a reduction in the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. I seem to remember that maybe about 50 or 60 years ago, biogas plants were being propagated in the rural areas, but they were not backed by any kind of intensive research, engineering support, or financial support. Quantity of biogas which can be generated in India is huge. The amount of waste we have, the agricultural waste we have, the other waste we have, can all be converted to biogas. But it requires a program which is well supported by the government and which will then be done not in a haphazard way by local administration and in our subdivision, but by the government on the same priority, if not a higher priority, than the EV program. And I think this is one program which is ideally suited to the Indian conditions. Hybrid technology is another means of reducing carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. The carbon CO2 reduction by hybrid technology is about 30%. But here again, there is no incentive to promote the use of CNG in the country. What I'm trying to say is that the electrification of vehicles in India is going to move slowly, and its impact on the reduction of greenhouse gases is going to be small because of the composition of the energy use in this country. And this is going to be the situation at least for the next 20 years, perhaps. In this period, we need to use other means of reducing greenhouse gases. And this includes the use of CNG, bio-CNG, ethanol, and hybrid technology. Government needs to look at all these alternative forms of energy which are especially applicable to in India. I don't think bio-CNG or CNG are applicable to the big cars which are used in America and perhaps in Europe also. But in India, this is a very adaptable and a very applicable technology. And we need to look at these, not only look at EVs. The transmission and distribution network in India, compared to the Western countries, is much, much weaker. We are all aware of the various outages which happen, even when power supply is available because the transmission system is distributed. Now, how soon and how capable the electricity boards with their weak finances are of making the transmission and distribution system adequate for a quick expansion of the electric vehicle program is something which also needs to be properly studied. Another important point I would like to highlight is that India has no reserves of lithium or cobalt. These are required for electric vehicles, whether in the battery for the vehicle or for storage of energy. The strategic and economic long-term impact of importing these materials in large quantities to support all our energy needs to be seen. And that makes it even more important to look at other sources of energy where we don't have to depend on outside. We can generate a lot of our energy through bio-CNG, natural CNG and import of some CNG, and by using hybrid technology. And therefore, my last point in this suggestion is that hydrogen is another serious long-term option. We need to study this also. And the Prime Minister has rightly called for expansion of green hydrogen production. We need to do more work in this area. But overall, I would submit for consideration of this August summit that electric vehicle technology in Indian conditions is not likely to give us the kind of results we want, let's say, in the next 10 to 15 years. We need to, but the importance of reducing greenhouse gases and CO2 cannot be denied. We need to work in that area. We have options for reducing CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the short term and at low cost. We have to use our own resources and our own technologies, which will be different from what is prevailing in the Western countries. I know working on bio-CNG does not have the glamour which is associated with doing work in a lab on electrification. But the needs of the Indian economy are different. We need to work out our own solutions suited to our own resources, our own conditions, and not just think that what is being done in the Western countries will work equally well here. Our per capita incomes, our poverty will not enable us to do it. We will not get the results we want. Therefore, this summit and other summits should not only look at EVs, but they should start looking at other options in India and realistically assess what will give best results in our country. Thank you very much, and thank you for the patience of listening to me.